Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Kmart, and I want to talk about some basketball. And today we are talking about the NBA Finals, the current situation in the series between the Celtics and the Mavericks, and whether Dallas at this point sort of has what it takes to potentially mount a comeback after falling behind early in this series. So, uh, kind of gave it away in the intro there, but Dallas is now behind in the NBA Finals. They dropped both of the first two games in Boston, so they're down 0-2. Kind of a rough go of things. Game two, they certainly put up a closer fight for sure, which leads us into the question of, how much better can they play? Do they have enough in them to potentially mount a comeback as the series goes back to Dallas? So it's a little bit of a good news and bad news sort of situation for Dallas, and I suppose we'll start on the more positive side for the Mavs. In terms of things going well for the Mavericks through these first two games, first and foremost, is that the team is competing on the interior, inside the paint, or on the glass more specifically. The rebounding margin between these two teams is pretty even. In terms of total rebounds through two games, the Mavericks have 86, the Celtics have 88. So barely really a difference between the two of them there. In terms of points in the paint, the Mavs actually technically have a slight advantage. They've scored 100 points in the paint in this series. The Celtics have scored 84. So a decent margin there for Dallas. The Mavericks are also averaging plus 4.5 second chance points. So, they're scoring points inside. They're rebounding about even with the Celtics. They are slightly ahead in terms of offensive rebounds and second chance points. And their two sort of major guys on the inside, Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, are contributing relatively well. Their combined shooting for the series is 20 for 36, and they've scored 52 total points in the series. So you're getting a decent amount out of your big men, right? The other good news for Dallas is that Luka Doncic is still putting up pretty incredible numbers, although it should be said it does appear that it is taking sort of a greater effort for him to get some of these numbers. But even so, in game one, 30 points, 10 rebounds, 46.2% shooting from the field. Meanwhile, in game two, 32 points, 11 rebounds, 11 assists, shooting 57.1% from the field. So Doncic is still sort of going. As I said, it does appear, especially in the second half of these games, that he is requiring a little bit more effort to get to some of these totals. I would say mostly because the Celtics defense starts to key in on him a little bit more, but he's still performing well. In terms of the bad news for Dallas, it's pretty much everything else, right? First, for the Mavs, in terms of what's gone wrong, Kyrie Irving is struggling well beyond what I think most people would have expected if he were to have a decline. Kyrie has scored 28 points through the first two games. He's shooting 13 for 37 from the field. That is 35.1%. And he has not made a three-pointer in the series at all, which is a bit of a problem because he was, prior to this, averaging at, or I think even slightly above, 40% from three in the previous rounds of the playoffs. He has not made a single one here. For Kyrie, it's not just the scoring that's sort of become the issue for him. The playmaking is down as well. He has 8 total assists through the first two games, compared to 5 turnovers. So, the assist to turnover ratio is still technically positive, but it's maybe not quite where they want it to be. And speaking of the assist count here, that leads us into sort of a wider team issue for Dallas, because the Mavs aren't really getting too many other guys involved on the offensive end. If you look at total assists for the team, Dallas has 30 total assists through the first 2 games. Boston has 52. So guys are still finding points here and there, but the ball is maybe not moving as much as Dallas would like. You're still getting contributions, right? I just mentioned in terms of the positive section for Dallas, the fact that PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford have been doing relatively well for them, and they have, right? PJ Washington has been in double digits twice in this 2-game series. Kyrie has scored double digits in both games, and Derrick Jones Jr., Daniel Gafford, and Hardy have each gotten to double digits once. So they are making minor contributions here, but no one other than Luka has scored more than 17 points in either game so far. And a lot of this is coming off of sort of unassisted, not quite ISO ball, so to speak, but not in as free-flowing of an offense as we've seen from Dallas in some of the previous rounds, right? And to cap off the sort of idea that the Mavs maybe aren't getting as many guys involved here, just as a quick note, in terms of bench production, Dallas is not in the best spot there either. In terms of totals, they are minus 20 in bench points compared to Boston. So the second unit really is not quite getting as much done for Dallas as they maybe were hoping for. In terms of more bad news really for Dallas, you take a look at the efficiency metrics here in this series, and you can see that Boston is winning in pretty much every single category. Not by a crazy amount in some areas, but they are still ahead. Obviously, higher point average. They've won the first 2 games. But they're also plus 1.9% in terms of field goal percentage. They're plus 7.4% in 3-point percentage. And in terms of free throws, Boston is shooting plus 17% compared to Dallas. So Boston's playing efficiently, but Boston is also not sort of overly reliant on a singular player. For Dallas, it really does seem to all be coming exclusively from Luka Doncic. Meanwhile, for the Celtics, they've got 5 players averaging 15 or more points through these first 2 games. They have had 3 different players score 20 or more points: Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, and Drew Holiday. And 3 players have scored 20 points or more. I think there's been 4 instances because Jaylen Brown's done it in both of the first 2 games. Meanwhile, the guy who most people assumed would be priority 1 in terms of trying to stop the Celtics, which is Jason Tatum, is shooting just 12 of 38 from the field, but that's really not slowing the Celtics down all that much. So one of their best players, and a guy who I think most people thought would be, like I said, the sort of primary threat, is shooting poorly, and it's just not really mattering because the rest of the Celtics are just doing an insane job of sort of picking up the slack. So that's a long list of things going wrong for the Mavericks, right? So what do? If the Mavs are going to mount a comeback, how is it going to happen? What is it going to look like? There's a couple of points where obviously things could improve for Dallas. Not guaranteed to get them back in the series, but they certainly couldn't hurt. Number 1, get Kyrie going again. You've got to find some way to get Kyrie back in this series, especially from 3. He was averaging well over 20 points per game in the playoffs. That has dropped off pretty significantly here. And as I mentioned earlier, he was shooting at or around 40% from beyond the arc in previous rounds of the playoffs. He has not made a 3-pointer yet against the Celtics. You need that previous version of Kyrie back if you're going to have any chance of beating what has been a very solid Celtics defense to this point. Second point here for the Mavericks: if you cannot outshoot Boston from 3, maybe you stop trying, right? The Celtics are shooting an insane amount of 3-pointers in this entire playoff run. In this series, they are shooting 40.5 3-pointers per game compared to Dallas shooting just 26.5 in terms of 3-point attempts. Boston is also hitting an average of 13 threes per game compared to just 6.5 for Dallas. So if the Mavs can shrink that gap, then by all means, do it, right? If you can get PJ Washington his corner threes, if you can get Kyrie Irving to start hitting shots from, well, anywhere really, but outside specifically, then go ahead and see if you can close that gap. If you can't, you need to switch to something else, right? If you're not going to outshoot the Celtics, then you really can't afford to just chuck threes against one of the best three-point shooting teams by both percentage and by volume that we've seen in these playoffs. Which leads into the sort of final point here for the Mavericks. Play physical. Try to play inside, and above all else, make your free throws, right? If we take a look at the free throw shooting for these two teams during the regular season, there was a pretty sizable disparity. The Celtics were 26th in the league in the regular season in free throw attempts per game. Dallas was 11th. Here in the playoffs, that gap has really narrowed, right? Among the 16 playoff teams, the Celtics are 9th in terms of free throw attempts per game. The Mavericks are 6th. But if you take a look at the free throws attempted so far in this series, the Mavs have shot 43, the Celtics have shot 39. So this is supposed to be an area where the Mavericks would have had an advantage. So far, they have not really been able to take advantage of it. Boston has one of the best defenses in the league. So I understand that the idea of going straight at it with the intent of playing physical basketball does sound slightly crazy. You're going to try to play physical against one of the best defenses in the league. But if your outside game isn't going to keep pace with Boston, right? The Mavs are making, on average, literally half as many three-pointers as the Celtics are. So if the outside game is not going to keep pace with Boston, what other choice do you have? You have to effectively try something different. If the Mavericks do take that more physical style, though, if they are forcing the Celtics to foul them, you have to be able to actually make those free throws, right? I mentioned earlier that they're shooting similar total attempts, but in terms of the actual percentage, there is a huge disparity. Boston is shooting 82.1% from the line. Dallas is shooting just 65.1. I mentioned that earlier. That was a plus 17% difference for Boston. So if you're Dallas, you got to get Kyrie going. You need to try to match Boston's three-point shooting. If you can't do it, do something else. And they need to try to play the stronger physical game, get to the free throw line, and obviously once you're there, actually make those shots. Now, all of that still might not be enough, right? The Celtics are an absolute elite team for a reason, and they have been strong through these first two games. But if the Mavs can't make any sort of adjustments, if they continue to just play, Luka Doncic hero ball while the rest of the team kind of watches and occasionally contributes a bucket or two, this series is going to be over pretty damn quickly, and Boston's going to walk away with another title. So if you're Dallas, you've got to try, because what they've been doing so far is not quite working out for them. So that's all I got. I mean, it sounds pretty simple when you say it and when you put it on paper, but obviously it's significantly harder to actually execute on the court. But what do you think? Do you believe Dallas are going to be able to get Kyrie Irving back into this series somehow, or will he continue to struggle? Can they match Boston's three-point shooting? At this point, I'm not even sure it's possible. And do you believe that trying to play more physical on the inside is something that could work for Dallas, or is it a scenario where you're just going to be going straight into the teeth of the Celtics defense and shoot yourself in the foot, so to speak? But whatever you think, please feel free to let me know, share your thoughts. But other than that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will talk to you later.